There's Heather. I'm going to promote her to a panelist. Nope. There we go. Hi, Heather. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to sign on. So folks are filtering in right now. We've got Heather joining us after some technical difficulties. We're so happy to see you.
Happy to be here.
Welcome, everyone. I like to give folks a couple minutes to find their link and log in. I think we're all familiar with that frantic, oh my goodness, my webinar's starting, where's the email with the link moment? Welcome, everyone. As you come in, if you could drop your name and your organization in the chat, love to see who's here. Always exciting.
Love seeing someone from Asheville. Yay, go Asheville.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Terry. Welcome, everyone. Good to see folks. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to get logged on before we get started. I hope everyone's staying warm. I feel like it should be springtime, but it's very, very cold in Pittsburgh.
And I didn't know it was going to snow today.
I didn't either. It just doesn't seem to want to end.
No.
It's nice though. It's a soft, gentle snow.
It is. It's lovely and gray. All right, we'll give it another minute or so. Oh yeah, it's early. It's only 1:02. I like to give folks at least three or four minutes to find their links. As you come in, drop your name and your organization in the chat so we can say hi and see who's here. Love to see the organizations represented month after month. So nice to see some of you again.
What's CET, Renee?
I know this. She probably knows it better, so we'll wait for her to pick that. But I do know this. Renee, was it you that I think I ate breakfast with at Refed?
Oh,
I had breakfast with somebody at Refed from CET. I met a few folks there.
Center for Ecotechnology.
Probably I would recognize them if I saw them. I think it might have been Emma. I don't know.
Where is that, Renee? Rebrandings, always an adventure.
Yes, yes. All right. Well, it's 1:03, so I think we will go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining us here. We have some great panelists today to talk about maximizing your board's potential. We have Deb Desjardins from Advancement Advisor Groups, John Mack from Bounteous, who is on the board of Food Rescue Hero, and Heather Stewart, who is the CEO of Kentucky Harvest. So we have got three unique perspectives on the issue of board engagement. Some housekeeping notes before we start. Drop your questions into the Q&A as we go. If you put them in chat, we sometimes lose them because chat scrolls by. So any questions, put them into Q&A. This is being recorded. We will be emailing the presentation to everybody who registered for the webinar within the next few days. So, if there's something that you missed, you can go back and take a look at it. All this great knowledge will still be there for the harvesting after the event. And at the end of the webinar, we will provide a couple of links for you, a link to register for the next webinar, and then a request for a follow-up meeting with somebody on our team if you want to do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deb. And let me just actually say where this came from, because I think just a little bit of context, which John was talking about beforehand, is we had a lot of our Food Rescue Hero partners in town last year, and John was there, and some folks were talking about how they were so excited to see one of our board members at the event, and that they struggled to sometimes get all of their board members to show up. So we started talking about how that sort of is a common thread across nonprofits, no matter what it is that you're doing, is not only getting an engaged board, but keeping an engaged board. And we've been working with Deb, and she's got such great ideas on this. We thought this is something that folks could really benefit from hearing about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deb.
Thanks, Jen. And hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you today. Um, I just want to thank you for being here and taking time for this because board engagement is just so critical to nonprofit success. And it's something that we can't just take for granted. You know, it's something that we really have to continue to work at. And so today we are going to talk about the specific tasks and activities that you can do to get your boards more engaged with your organization and what tools you need to help them increase their comfort and confidence in their roles. Now, I'm going to lean a little heavily into fundraising because that is my particular area of expertise. And such an important engagement point for our boards, right? I'm guessing that most of the organizations here rely exclusively on contributed support, and our board members should be playing such an important role in that. So that's a big part of board engagement. So I will lean into that, but I'll also address board engagement overall. And I want you to get the most out of this as possible. Make sure we have time for questions. So I'll move fairly quickly through. And if I mention specific tools during the course of this presentation, I would be happy to share samples with you. So if that's something that you hear that you're interested in, just drop that into the chat or question or whatever makes sense, Jen. And I'll make sure that we send that out along with the slides. So I just talked a little bit about why board engagement matters generally. It does drive organizational success and mission fulfillment. It enables organizations to leverage valuable skills and networks. Hopefully, we're recruiting board members from different industries with different experiences, different perspectives, and that combination of things can really benefit the nonprofit they're serving in lots of different ways. And especially like when we think about their professional expertise, like John was just talking about his technology skills and how he's able to really that 412 Food Rescue and Food Rescue Hero really benefit from his knowledge and expertise. It's a tech company. Of course, we want tech people there, right? We also want to make sure that their business connections can help lead to new food donors and donor partnerships, and that they can also maybe provide some pro bono services. So like maybe John, he might be providing something to Food Rescue Hero that he charges other people a lot of money for. You know, maybe we want to make sure we have people with legal experience, with human resources experience. All those kinds of things really can help a nonprofit organization function at a higher level if we can tap into those things. And then finally, it strengthens fundraising and community connections. Engaged board members are more likely to make personal donations, and just a promo here, 100% of your board members should be giving. That is writing a check, although that's no longer being done a lot, clicking on your online giving page. And it should be a gift that is meaningful for them. I'm not a believer in board giving minimums because that ends up becoming kind of a lowest common denominator situation. But, if they're on your board, they're making a significant commitment. Your organization should be among their top philanthropic priorities, and they should be making a financial gift that is significant for them, whatever that might be. And that is a conversation that you should be having individually with your board members on an annual basis. And then, of course, they can also serve as ambassadors for your organization in their professional and social circles. and they can connect with other donors and maybe high net worth donors, maybe foundation officials in ways that can really support the organization. So let's move on to the next slide, please. But one way to really get our board members excited about all this work is connecting them to our mission. And that way they can personally experience the transformational work that our organizations are doing. So we can give them hands-on volunteer sessions where they can participate in food recovery and distribution. We want to share with them specific impact stories and data in board meetings. Like last month, we rescued 10,000 pounds of food that fed 500 families, or whatever those numbers might be. I like to have in board meetings what I call mission moments. Sometimes boards can get caught up in the business of the organization, and having like a mission moment at the beginning of a board meeting just kind of reminds us why we're all here. Why we're doing this, why we're taking time to be here. We can certainly be arranging visits to partner organizations and recipient communities to make sure that our board members aren't just attending board meetings. We want them to stay connected to that mission. And then, we can have beneficiaries occasionally speak at our board meetings or other events we might be having. I mean, how great is it for someone who's giving their time, as well as their wisdom and wealth, we hope, to an organization to hear directly from someone who's benefiting from it? That's really motivating. So let's move on to the next one, please. But to be successful, I think, at board engagement, we need to give them clear roles and expectations. When we're inviting someone to serve on our board, what are we telling them? What does that mean? Do we have something we can show them that is literally a job description explaining what we want them to do? Are we clear that we want them to make a financial gift to this organization, that's part of our expectation? These are things that are really important. And this is something I can provide if you want, is a sample board member job descriptions. We also have sample committee descriptions, like the development committee, the governance committee, all the different board committees. These are very important so that people kind of are all on the same page and they know what they're supposed to be doing. And then we also want to be setting specific annual goals for each board member that are measurable. Like, for example, connect with 3 new corporate donors, bring 2 guests to a fundraising event. There are lots of different things ways that board members can do things that are very impactful and specific. But like I referenced just a minute ago, executive directors should be meeting one-on-one with every board member every year to discuss this, as well as their overall engagement and leadership. So this is going to touch on a lot of different things, because one of the things we were talking about a little bit before the webinar started was, when you lose a board member, and kind of some of the engagement kind of goes along with them, right? And we don't ever want that to happen. We want our board engagement to be across the board, so that when people do roll off, as they should, we should have term limits. We should be always, bringing new people into the organization and have succession plans and those things. But how do we make sure that we aren't taking anything for granted? So I want to be meeting with my board members individually, with my executive director, and saying, John, how are you feeling about, I saw you missed a couple meetings this year, can you tell me what's going on? And we kind of had you in mind to maybe become vice president in a year or two. Is that something that might be of interest to you? So it's having those kinds of conversations. And then also, something like, hey, Jen, we noticed that your giving has kind of increased over the last couple of years. Is that something that you could see continuing? Because, boy, that would be really great if you could continue to grow your giving. That would mean a lot to the organization. Or, Heather, last year you brought 2 new sponsors to our big fundraiser. You seem to be really great at that. Could you maybe bring a couple more this year? So having these kinds of conversations that are specific, and where you get to hear from your board members too. what they're experiencing and what they might, what might help them be more engaged. So they're time consuming, but I think they really are important. All right, I think we can move to the next slide. So that is, roles and expectations. But another really important ingredient to board engagement success is having a plan. It's again being specific. All right, we've given them a job description, we've shared our expectations. Now what do we do? Well, we got to have a plan. And so many small organizations, especially, and I know that many of you are very small organizations, struggle to kind of take time to create a plan. And we have plan templates that we can share. But when we have a plan, we know that data tells us it's the best predictor of nonprofit success, which is critical, and especially fundraising success. And it's not necessarily about checking your plan every day, but it's the act of planning largely that creates the benefits. So even if your plan sits on the shelf, you're still getting the benefits from it because you went through the process, you had the conversations, and you determined what the priorities are going to be and what the timelines are. And it also helps prevent us from kind of like going from thing to thing, being sort of jerked around by, oh, this happened, and so now we have to turn our attention to this. No. And again, I'm going to reference fundraising because fundraising doesn't always seem urgent until it is, until you get to the end of your fiscal year and you're like, oh no. But fundraising requires consistent, dedicated, ongoing effort. And, you might know that you should be meeting with this one donor who has a lot more capacity and could be giving a lot more to your organization. Oh, but I can do that next week. Oh, this came up. I'll do that the week after. Fundraising just never seems urgent. So I always want to put a plug in for it, that it requires real consistent effort. And so having that plan is critical and knowing what our priorities are as an organization. It also prevents, and I know none of you have these board members, but there are board members out there who can kind of hijack the agenda of the organization a little bit. And having a plan, kind of prevents that. And so who's responsible for the plan? Well, the board, certainly. I think we want the board to remain high level, although again, I know in small organizations, they tend to get more involved in the details than otherwise. But it's something that generally is developed by the staff and then goes to the board because we want them to not only approve it, but to be part of executing it, right? And then, that also, the plan should include not just the staff who are mostly responsible for execution, but where does the board fit in? Where does the development committee fit in? Where does the governance committee fit in? Where does the finance committee fit in? So that everyone knows, again, what their roles are and kind of stays in the lane, if you will. So it's best to develop a plan based on the needs and resources of the time, budget, staff, volunteers, and organizational culture. Then do it well, consistently and constantly for the greatest impact and organic and strategic growth over time. Even if your organization is small, you still need a plan. And if you have a plan, Jen, then you will, oh, did we skip one? Huh. Okay. Well, you will raise more money. You will be more successful as an organization in achieving your goals.
Sorry, that's the next slide I have. So I don't know if we skipped one or what happened.
Yep. So I do want to talk specifically, spend a little time talking specifically about fundraising because it is just such an important part for board engagement. And we talk often about the fundraising myth, that a lot of people associate fundraising with begging, with rejection, with making cold calls, which sound terrible, right? And these myths are really often at the core of why many board members are resistant to or even afraid of fundraising. But that is not what good fundraising is or about. It is, in fact, never about money. Good fundraising is about changing the world. And we need to remember that making a gift, a charitable gift to a nonprofit organization is really a pleasant experience that can feel joyous to the donor. And as board members, they're sharing their passion and helping the world make a better place. I know that John is involved in Food Rescue Hero because he started out as a volunteer. He became passionate about what they were doing, and he wanted to play a bigger role in it. And being asked to give makes people feel important. It really does. So a big part of our work is to help eradicate some of these myths around fundraising and work with our board members so that they can find a comfort level with it and know what their role is. So that means reframing the board's role. And let's go to the next slide, Jen. So instead of being, beggars, we're asking them to support fundraising by acting as ambassadors who cultivate connections and introduce new people to our organizations, as connectors who connect our organizations to their networks and bring donors to the organization. And as solicitors, yes, some board members may actually like to ask potential and current donors to invest in the work of the organization. We certainly don't want to discourage that. We want to encourage it. And then also as stewards, and this is a part that often gets overlooked and not just in fundraising, but even in board engagement in general. It's caring for, minding, watching over, guarding, protecting, safeguarding. In this specific case, I'm talking about donor retention. What are we doing to ensure that our donors are feeling great? Are we communicating with them? Are we sharing impact? And we need to do that with our board members broadly, right? But when it comes to fundraising, we know it costs as much as 5 times more to find a new donor than it does to keep an existing donor. So when we're talking about our small resources, we really need to be investing in that stewardship piece. So let's go to the next slide. So a key lesson, and again, this can apply broader than just fundraising, but the most powerful tool our board members have is their passion for the mission of the work of the organization. Yes, in fundraising, but broadly. And I always say, it is the people who are passionate about your mission who will sustain the organization. If you're trying to recruit board members who aren't exhibiting some passion for your organization, and I don't know if other communities see this, but I see this in Pittsburgh a little bit. Again, I'm sure none of your board members have this, but there's a little bit of a board climbing dynamic in Pittsburgh. You're on a certain board and that has a certain cachet with it. And I see board members that it's not that they're passionate about the mission. They think, oh, this is a good board for me to serve on. And we don't want to shortchange our organizations. That's why we want to be having these conversations with our potential board members. What is it? It's like interviewing for a job. Why are you interested in us? And so when we talk about the why instead of the what, we have a tendency to focus on those whats. What programs are offered, what clients are served, what the most recent statistics are. But the best messages are around the whys. Why your organization? Why is your organization important to the community? This is why people give, and it's the why that motivates giving and more broadly, board engagement. And if we can bring that passion for the why to our conversations, then the engagement, the gifts, all the other things will follow. And I just want to mention briefly here, again, fundraising specific. 75% of giving in the United States is from individuals, not from 75% from individuals, people like you and me, 20% from foundations, and really a little less than 10% from corporations. So when we're talking to our board members about their community connections that they can bring to the organization, the most powerful one they can bring in terms of long-term impact, unrestricted funding, is individuals. So I want us to keep that in mind as we're thinking about where we're going to spend our time in terms of fundraising. So thank you, Jen. You're reading my mind now. So I just wanted to speak briefly about the fundraising process again, because it's so critical, and we want to help your board members understand this. But this is the cycle. There are these 4 basic steps. The identification process is finding those potential donors who have the capacity and the inclination to support your organization. And side note, let's remember capacity, it doesn't mean they can write a $10,000 check. Maybe they can give you $100 a month. And over time, that's a significant commitment. So we need to be thinking more broadly in terms of capacity these days, because so many more people want to give that way, which, hey, bring it on. The engagement or cultivation step is specific strategies to raise awareness of the organization and grow the inclination of identified potential donors towards supporting it. So those are things like volunteering, communications, tours, and events. What are things we can do to bring people into the organization and cultivate them as potential donors? And then, of course, there's the ask stage, and this is just what you think it is. It's specific strategies to ask potential donors to make a financial investment in your organization. And then thanking. And again, not something we spend enough time on as nonprofit organizations in general, but those are specific strategies designed to acknowledge and appreciate and retain donors so that they stay with your organization. And this is a great place to engage board members. Can they make some calls to some new donors? Can you bring some thank you notes and have them write some handwritten thank you notes at a board meeting? And think about that. How many of us get handwritten thank you notes? And one of the things I always say is that we need to do it better than the other organizations. Because if I'm getting a call from 412 Food Rescue's board to thank me for my gift, but the pet shelter where I also donate, I'm not hearing from them, the next time it's time for me to make decisions about my giving, I might be increasing my gift for 412 Food Rescue because, man, they really are showing the appreciation. So this is a great place to engage board members because it's not asking, and it can be really, rewarding for them, and it feels impactful, especially because research tells us that when board members call donors, their next gift can go up by as much as 30%. Like that's data that we have out there. And very quickly, I want to mention the fundraising cycle, and I want to point out this part where the ask is, look, the smallest slice of the pie. All these other areas are as important. Now, the ask is an essential part for sure, but there are lots and lots of other opportunities for board members to be engaged in the fundraising process, again, as those ambassadors, connectors, and stewards. And if it's not their comfort level, they never have to ask for a gift. Another reason, going back to those one-on-one meetings with board members, what is their comfort level? There are all these ways they can be involved in fundraising, for example. What are they willing to host an event at their home to bring new potential donors to the organization? Not everyone wants to do that, but some are great at it. So, it's across the board, identifying the places where they can have an impact in an area where they really bring some skill and some knowledge. And then finally, a word about thank you. I really can't emphasize this enough. And I mentioned, and someone asked in the chat about the source. Oh, the source isn't in there. I'll give it to you verbally. But there's a woman who studies donor stewardship. Her name's Penelope Burke. And she found that donors receiving a thank you call from a board member within 24 hours of making their gift gave 39% more 14 months later, those donors gave 42% more than donors who didn't get a call, and they had a 70% retention rate as donors. So these are small things, great ways to engage your board members and have a real impact on the bottom line in terms of your fundraising. So it's just one of the easiest and most effective ways board members can be involved, specifically in the fundraising process, but broadly in your organization. And then finally, the importance of creating a culture of philanthropy. It's that shared responsibility that everyone is in this together on your board, integrating with the mission, using fundraising as an engagement tool with your board members, and then finally, focusing on growing and maintaining those strong donor relationships. And I'm going to stop there because I know it's 1:30 and that we wanted to make sure we kept time for questions.
Yeah, and I'm also, so I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen so that we can see your actual faces in action rather than your pictures. And I want to start by talking to John as a board member. What about that resonates with you? You're a very active board member. How have we or other organizations sort of helped cultivate that in you, and what could we do better?
Thank you, Jen, and thanks, Deb, for that presentation. I think a lot resonated with me in there, especially the idea of a rapid response to a donation. I've never thought about it in this sense, so that sounded really great. I, I've been on the 412 Food Rescue and Food Rescue Hero board for over 3 years now. So I've also gotten to see how the organization has changed over the past 3 years. And I think it's going through a great growth phase where we're trying to adopt some of those best practices. So Deb, you talked about bringing folks onto the board and setting clear expectations, talking about how they can contribute through their time, through their fundraising, through their resources, setting those expectations about time management. What are we expect you to do with your network? How can you help expand that? And so some of the things that the board has done with the collaboration with the nonprofit is rolled out a new onboarding process, a way to help kind of inspire and teach about the mission while also reminding the board members their role and the impact that they can have when they lean into some of those specific things like their network, like their fundraising, how they can engage and be a part of the process. I think something that 412 and Food Rescue Hero have done really well is expand who has communicated with the board. So in addition to the fundraising requests and giving us ideas for how we can contribute around some of the major giving events at the end of the year, I've also gotten the chance to participate in some of the innovative things that I really enjoy. So thinking about the future of the technology, thinking about how to engage with the partner network better, giving advice and strategy and collaborating where I can bring my skills and the things that I've learned through my corporate career to benefit the organization and spark some conversations, challenge some ideas, hopefully come up with that better strategy. And lastly, I'll say that I think there's also been an increase in how the board has gotten requests from the nonprofits to say, hey, we've got a really specific thing that we're looking for. Can we get 3 to 5 board members to agree to do this? It should take 20 minutes. Here's all of the things you need to do. And sometimes that might be coming to an event. Sometimes that might be sharing on social media or sending an email or writing to a legislator, right? Something like that, where it's so easy for me to pick up in the middle of my day and contribute. That goes a long way throughout the year to continue to build that muscle memory to be able to contribute and feel really confident when I'm put on the spot to talk about the mission of the organization, to know why I'm so passionate about it, because I've been doing it every month and I've been able to talk to different people in different channels.
Yeah, that's you've been an amazing board member, John. And I think what you've said really kind of also echoes something that Deb brought up, which is if somebody's uncomfortable with making an ask, right? Maybe there's something else they could do. And I want to bounce off of that to what you said is that you really enjoy some of that those innovative conversations. So we can, not that you don't want to make an ask, but we do know that what you do want to do is leverage your skills in talking about marketing and communications and innovation. And so, what are your board members passionate in? And how can you get them excited to bring those skills to the table? I know actually sit on a number of boards, and the ones where I have the most engagement are the ones that, I get a chance to have fun with participating in, as opposed to it feeling like, oh, I've got to work, I've got to go do this for the board that I'm on.
Absolutely. And I think some of the things that have helped there are task forces or committees that are aligning a smaller group, giving them a bigger microphone and an ability to lean into their skill sets. We've got so many smart people on the board that have different life experiences and can bring 15, 20, 30 years of experience to the table and say, we know how this works. We've done it before. Let's structure it this way. Let's do it that way. So that's, I know sometimes boards have those, but maybe they're not as frequently attended or as nurtured or fed, as Jen was saying. So I think when you can create those spaces where someone can give that experience, they can give their advice, and that comes from anyone in the organization asking those questions. I think too often organizations are thinking that the only communication can go through the CEO or the executive director. I think that's a conversation to have, to say, hey, would this be something we could take to them? Is this something that we can get some feedback on? Here's the draft that we have. Is there someone we can ask for review or advice? I've always had great success in getting that sort of feedback from boards that I've worked with, where they're happy to share advice in advance. They're happy to look over things. Um, Certainly communicate and coordinate carefully. But I think some people are scared to ask, or just unaware that there's probably people that can assist and help out with the planning portion of the nonprofit.
Well, and also having templates we can provide to board members for some of those different things we're asking them to do. It's a great way to make it easier for them. Templates for social media posts, for emails, for letters, whatever it is.
We get great little social media kits from Food Rescue Hero that says, here's what we're hoping you can post in this date range, and then we can tweak it ourselves and make it feel
perfect. Yeah. And then AI can really help generate some of those.
It's a different
Well,
webinar, but ready to talk about it. Sorry, Jen, that's you.
remembering that board members are also very busy and making it as easy as possible for them to contribute. If you want them to post on social media, give them everything they need to do that. So they don't have to go look up your handle or find the hashtag or look up the details. They can personalize it if they want, but just make it as easy as possible. Now I want to switch over to Heather. Heather, you have I asked you to come here because you've got both really great experiences, and I'm sure as a CEO, you've also faced challenges with boards. And it's important to remember that, a relationship with the board is a moving target. And so I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about some of your experience and, what has been successful, maybe what hasn't been successful, or what lessons you've learned that you can share with folks here.
What I have seen success with in a lot of the boards that I've worked on is putting them on subcommittees and doing that based upon their experience in various areas. So currently, for example, we have 5 subcommittees. One is marketing and public awareness. One is distribution and logistics. We've got finance and fundraising, community outreach and partnerships, and then technology and data. And the idea behind these subcommittees, although it doesn't always work out as planned, the idea is they are doing work in between the board meetings and having a separate set meeting between our bi-monthly meetings. And then they can report back what's going on under their area of expertise, because obviously we all don't have skill sets that check all those boxes. So I have seen some good success with that. It makes the board members feel engaged. It's because they're talking about their area of expertise. We feel like we're getting really good advice and guidance on how to move forward. And then, ultimately and ideally, we're able to take all of those meeting notes back and plug them into our strategic plan and, really go forward from there.
I wanted to ask Heather, how many folks are on your board? The first question we have dropped into chat is, what's the optimal board size? So I want to start by asking you, how many people are on your board?
Our board is 15. My personal opinion is 12 to 15 is a good number, depending on the size of your organization. Anything more seems to me to be overwhelming. I've worked with some really, really large boards that needed to be cut down. It's just hard to get consensus when you have too many people, I think sometimes. That's my personal opinion.
Deb or John, do you have insight on that?
When people ask me about this, I usually say what works best for the organization, to be really thoughtful about it. If you're a large, complex organization, you might need a larger board with more committees. And then when that happens, it's the executive committee that tends to be, more making more of the decisions and not the whole board. But it really depends on it's unique, I think, to each organization what works best.
Yeah, and I think 412 and Food Rescue here are about 12 to 18 would be the size. I know we've recently added new folks and new specialties, and that's just been a really engaging, encouraging process as new people get in that are bringing their passion and their excitement.
I think we just need to be asking ourselves questions like, if our board engagement is weak, is one of the reasons that we have too many board members. Often organizations go through, changes in terms of, it is often in the board bylaws. I'm not sure it should be unless it's a pretty broad range, but sometimes, we just need to right size it a little bit.
Yeah. I see there we've got two questions. The first one we sort of just touched on, so I'm gonna ask it here. That was Nikki Ross from Table to Table wanted to know if we'd be willing to share subcommittee descriptions and duties. And I'm going to pause there. And instead of doing that, what I would ask is, Heather, maybe you can send us a list, but I want to ask Deb to talk maybe about that concept of subcommittees. The board that I'm on currently right now that I put the most time in, we have three subcommittees only. One is external, one is internal, and one is governance. And one deals with like the structure of the org. The other one deals with like fundraising and uh, uh, staffing and things like that. And the other one is external. I think I might have fundraising in the wrong one. It might be an external, but because it's a smaller board, we just have three committees and like everything is thrown into one that makes sense. What is the best approach to creating board subcommittees?
Well, again, I think it's really unique to the organization, right? I would say we want board members to be engaged in specific things that align with their skills and interests, right? So I think governance is really critical to board engagement as a committee, because they're tasked with finding new members, thinking about succession, thinking about officers. That is one of the real foundational elements of board engagement. So, and they also are responsible for that onboarding, John, that you mentioned. Generally speaking, when you have a governance committee, those are the things they're responsible for, right? So to me, that's a really important one to have for board engagement purposes. They help prevent your board from getting stale, and stale, a stale board that's like a direct path to disengagement, right? I think fundraising is crucial. And I think fundraising as distinct from marketing and communications, because when we lump those together, they tend to go toward the marketing and communication stuff because that's more in the comfort level. But it really depends on your organization and what your mission is, what your needs are. I mean, here we're talking about all food rescue organizations. So, and you're small. I know 412 Food Rescue doesn't have many committees, because, it's a small organization. The board isn't very large. You don't want to overburden your board members by asking them to serve on multiple committees. So we really want to be thoughtful and strategic with which committees we're having and how they can most help the organization be successful.
Yeah, I think if you try to fracture it too much, you end up with basically just every committee meeting being a board meeting because all the members are on each committee. So that, I mean, then it's more like a working session of the board.
I'd like to add something to that too, because our subcommittees also change, because it depending on what our big goal is at the time. So, just keep that in mind. Yeah, they change and they ebb and they flow with the direction that we're going and the new goals and initiatives.
Well, and sometimes it might not need to be a committee. It might need to be like a task force. Like, for example, if your organization relies on federal funding, I'd be putting a task force together to figure out, how we're gonna deal with this, right? Again, because it doesn't have to be your whole board engaged in that. And you might have a couple of people on your board who are particularly skilled at digging into that a little bit. But I think that's a great way to think about adding purposeful subgroups to your board, is thinking about it in a way that's not a formal committee that exists forever, but it's some kind of short-term task force subcommittee that can address something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's such great advice and such great insight, is that not everything has to be forever. And if a subcommittee isn't serving you, then either, get rid of it, or a committee, get rid of it or repurpose it.
Well, and another plug for like task force and subcommittees, it's a great way to bring people in who aren't necessarily board members, but might have some content expertise, or to trial potential board members. So I always encourage boards to think about how you can engage non-board members, especially in fundraising, by putting them on one of your committees or subcommittees.
That actually rolls into the next question. I've noticed a lot of vocabulary around board members' experience and expertise. Do you take board members' interests in mind as well? And if so, how?
You can start there. I think what we want are board members that are, first of all, interested in the nonprofit in the area where the service is happening. I know we tend to lean on sort of the corporate background, the experience, and the expertise, but we also have a diversity of opinions on the best metrics to focus on, or the benefits. With food rescue, right, you can be thinking about the reduction in waste, the climate change effects. You can be thinking about how food rescues are providing meals to people who need them. And I think that's where we lean into people's individual interests, and we hear from that as we're talking about initiatives or programs. People will chime in and have their influence and their thoughts that way. And we certainly see people that come from a professional background, but are also interested in the event side or the program side, and so they like to come to the events. I think we had 3 or 4 of our board members attend the food rescue conference. Certain folks are more interested in the fundraising dinners, or meeting directly with the foundations, right? So I think we've got a little bit of both. We probably lean more on the expertise to make sure that we have folks that we can go to, and we're looking for answers to specific questions or guidance on initiatives that we're starting.
I
But
think
just
too, I'm sorry, Jen. I think too, like Deb said earlier, if they have an interest and you can plug them in somehow else, like I had a huge gala committee for a nonprofit that I worked for before I came to Kentucky Harvest, and it's a really good way to audition people and see how they interact and see what kind of things that they want to do for the organization before you offer them a seat on the board, because we have to take what their level of expertise and their skill set is into consideration before bringing them forward. Yeah.
um, there's a I don't know where this came from. Maybe this came from you, John, but it's a really good question, actually. And it's kind of gets into the weeds, but I think it's really important. And that is, what is the right time what's the right amount of communication with the board, right? What's the right time to reach out? How do you reach out? Because if you under communicate, they're not going to be super engaged. But if you over communicate, they can shut off. Like if I just get so many emails, at some point I'm like, okay, I just can't. That is not my top priority. So what is the right amount of communication with the board?
Sure. I think that it's different for every individual and for every board, right? Some people are inbox zero. Some people can't, read anything that comes in. For me personally, I think probably I like a little bit more frequent communication. So I know some of the initiatives that have been rolled out are monthly reports for marketing and communications, highlighting some of the great things that have happened, the posts that have gone well. We were featured on the news, something like that. I love to see the successes and the victories. I love to see the evidence of the plan working. For things like Deb, talking about fundraising and asking board members to participate in letter writing campaigns and things like that. One thing I really appreciate is not only getting the ask, but then 2 to 3 weeks later, getting some follow up that says, and by the way, here's how it's going. Here's who we've heard from. Would you like to follow up again or thank them? And so I think there's a little bit of both. It's getting the board excited. It's sharing it just enough. I think the newsletter you send out, Jen, is monthly, right? So that's not too infrequent. It's not too long. I can look at it at my own pace. It's not an urgent need to reply communication, but that's the stuff that gets me excited. So I really appreciate that. And then when we do get asks, they're small, they're time bound, they're very specific. And so that's the proactive stuff. And then the follow up is the thing that makes you want to do it again because you see that it was successful. You saw how great that event went, or that conference went, or that program went.
There's another question here. At what level should the ED participate in subcommittees, or should subcommittees be just reporting to the ED?
Is that for me? I I think it varies. I think that some subcommittees run very well on their own, depending on the leadership and depending on the people that you have on the committee. I think when you have, operations specific things that you're trying to discuss, I think that somebody from the staff probably needs to be present to kind of field those questions and make sure that everybody's staying on track. So I really think it's a mix of both, and it depends.
Heather, I actually have another question for you, and that is, do you have any advice or thoughts on or cautionary tales about, what not to do? You don't have to share any mistakes that you've made if you don't want to, but I do. That's something I always would ask folks is if you could go back and like undo a decision or edit yourself, what would you do?
If I could go back in time, let's see. I probably in my past would have not given some of the the board chairs that I've worked with maybe so much leeway, so much decision making power for the organization. Like I would make sure that they talk to everybody on the board instead of making decisions in silos. I think that sometimes that when we get into that position where decisions are being made more like a mandate than bringing everybody in and everybody to the table, I've seen that mistake be made.
Well, and also I think that is disempowering to other board members. And if you want a fully engaged board, making sure that everybody feels they're part of that process is probably really important.
Yeah, so I think transparency and communication really are the key.
Great. Are there any other questions? I know we're coming up on time, and I know, Deb, you're going to have to run in a minute. Are there other questions that folks have that we haven't answered? We can always answer questions by email for anything that we didn't get to. And we will definitely be sending out the follow-up materials that folks have asked for. And Karen, do you want to drop in the chat the links for the webinar, the next webinar, and everything else we promised?
What she just did. I think just one closing note here, thinking about from the board member perspective. I know we worked with Deb and did an internal survey, and what I think it was by a far margin, the board wanted to engage more and to be asked to do more. There's a little bit that comes with that, which is offering some training or some message training, mission training, just to make sure people feel empowered to do the tasks. But I think there's more to ask from people. And if they're volunteering to spend their time on the board and they're passionate about growing the mission of the organization, we should be finding the things that they're excited about and the things that they can contribute. And we should make sure that we're constantly engaging with them, and we shouldn't be afraid to ask for something. I mean, the worst that can happen is they say no. And if you get to that pattern of lots of no's or people not showing up, I can understand how that might be frustrating, but I think it's better to ask and to keep saying, like, this is valuable to us. Thank you for your contribution. Your opinions would be useful here because of your expertise, or your time here would be valuable to talk directly to volunteers or donors. We'd really appreciate to have at least a few people here, maybe some new people that we haven't seen before, something like that. So I encourage everyone to find ways to collaborate. I think it's a great way to get people involved.
Yeah. Any final words, Deb?
Thank you for including me, and I wish everyone great success.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you all so much.
There was one final question in there, which is, does the chair of the committee make the final decision? Do you want to just answer that in passing? I think that varies.
I think that varies. I think if it's a small decision, like a marketing decision, and they're the lead of the marketing committee, yes. I think that big decisions have to be brought to the board as a whole.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for being here. This is such an important topic and one we don't talk a lot about, which is just so funny because it's really critical to our work is to have an engaged and active board. It can make or break an organization. So I appreciate all your insights today. And thank you everybody for being here and for asking questions and being engaged. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, which I didn't put the topic up and I can't remember what it is at this particular moment because Karen, if you remember what it is, I'm going to drop it in the chat. We can say that. We're doing another webinar next month. It'll be really cool. I'm sure it's going to be really great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you.
Thanks.